And then once you get a guest, congratulations, you got a guest. You have 1 week to prep for it. So how do you do that? Well, what I do is I make a list of questions. What I found is I write a bio, I ask my questions, and by that I formulate the podcast in my head. And I found if you, including the bio, if you go a page of questions a little longer, it'll get to about an hour, at least for me. And I'm going to show you right now what those questions look like. So let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome to the clip of how I formulate my guest questions and how I populate this. Now, you can be watching this clip on YouTube and its individual form, which thank you. Welcome, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Or you're watching the full video also on YouTube, and we cut away to the clip. We'll be right back to that full podcast in just a second. But first, I am here to show you how I formulate my questions for my guests, the basic structure I use. I use this philosophy and structure for all of my guests. So, for this example, we're going to use Talking with Tarashuk, episode number 40, with Kirsten Wagner, who is the author of the beautiful game, English for Football or Soccer. So the first thing I do is obviously have the name of the podcast up the top with the guest as well as then like her title or their title. Put that here as well. I have a bio, so I know who it is I am talking to, so I can introduce them to my audience. Now, I literally read this word for word on the podcast while I am recording. So you, the audience, know exactly who it is, as well as the guests. They feel pretty good about being introduced. I have gotten many a compliment of how well I do at introducing guests, so I take pride in that. Now, for this particular guest, she actually provided me with most of this bio. If a guest provides you with the bio, use it, or at least use some of it. I did use some of this. Some of this I wrote myself. Some of this I took directly from her. So I thought that was the best way to go about things. If you want to use the one they give you, use one they give you. If you want to use one you write yourself, write one yourself. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. Make up your own mind is what I say. But from there, I always start with just general questions. You know, who are you? What do you do? What's your life story? Just most basic of stuff. And then kind of introducing what the rest of the stuff I'm going to talk about is. That's why I just put it under general. Now, for Kirsten, her particular thing is that she is an author. She wrote a book. She loves soccer, and she's an English business trainer. So that's great. I have English business trainer as my Act 1. I have soccer and World Cup as Act 2, because me, not being a big fan of soccer, I had to find something to tie it into that was personal for me, because it's a Talk My Tarashuk podcast. The P stands for personal in my podcast acronym. And then I had a book, which is, you know, what she would like to talk about. So I started with English business trainer because that is her job. That is what she does. And from there, I can tie that into her book as well as the World Cup in soccer. So this is his general introduction. This is foundational, who she is as a professional. Why is she an expert? Why am I talking to her? Why does she matter? She gets to prove her expertise with, you know, strong communication skills. This is her phrase. I put this question down because it's something that connected with me. You know, my job is to make your life easier and not get in the way. That is something as a producer I live by. I want to make your job in your life as simple as possible. And her motto is helping people do their job better. So that's great. Just basic questions around communication. You know, the biggest communications problem you see in international companies. And I had a question, you know, what does international mean? Is it New York versus Tokyo offices, or is it between two different companies? I just kind of make that distinction. That's something I wanted to know. And these are just questions used as guidelines. A lot of the questions I actually asked on the podcast, I would ask, like, what kind of businesses do you work with? And then from there, I ask more in-depth questions based upon her answer. I build. I'm not a talking head. I don't just ask questions. I communicate, I engage, and I build upon the question I ask. Now, these questions are just, again, guidelines back to center. If we kind of lost something to talk about, I go and come back to my questions and ask another questions. If the conversation kind of dies, I go back to these questions. Sometimes I don't even ask all the questions. Sometimes I ask too many questions. Sometimes I write too many questions. So I kind of get a feel for how the podcast is going, and cut questions on the spot. So from there, talk about soccer and World Cup. You know, I did some research on the World Cup and asked questions about my research. You know, how does a country get selected? Yada, yada, yada. Cultural impact. Can I connect it to the Olympics? This is a thought I have. So when I see, okay, does she agree with me? Does she disagree with me? That could be good conversation. How did she get into soccer? Make it personal to her. And then I connected language, because she is an English business trainer, connected language to soccer, which is also the theme of her book. So it kind of flows 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, all into the other. And I do find that typically 1 page of questions is about an hour of recording. So keep that in mind when you're formulating questions with your guests. So I hope this helps you in your journey to having guests and formulating your questions. But thank you for listening to the clip. Like, share, subscribe, follow for more content on how to start your podcast. And if you're listening to the full video, we're going to hop back right now. So I hope that helps you, right? Like seeing the questions I ask, how I formulate the thought, the idea of, I start with a general question. Who are these people? What I want to talk about? And then kind of like if they're selling a book or if they have like a new show coming out or whatever, kind of get stuff that they would want to talk about, something interesting, wrap it up and go home. But that comes with doing research. So how do you do research on your guest? Well, I ask them. Like when I schedule the interview, I go, hey, send me links to whatever you will find interesting. This can be your website. If they have a website, give me your website. Social media channels, give me your social media channels. If you've been guests on other podcasts, give me those podcasts. I will go and listen to those podcasts. I will scrum through the website, look for things I find interesting. So to go and go, ooh, I can answer that. There was one podcast I spoke to an author, and in his email, he gave me a fun fact that he went to clown college. So I was like, that's awesome. We talked about 20 minutes about him going to clown college. So I never would have known that if I didn't ask and he didn't put it in that email. So shout out to that guy.